Welcome to the GEM series, powered by Rocket Level. On this podcast, we empower entrepreneurs to succeed by setting big goals, executing like a pro, and having a fearless mindset. The GEM series is all about investing in yourself. We're here to share the path to getting what you want out of life by sharing the stories of entrepreneurs who have done this themselves, providing thorough research from our team on what careers and habits are yielding the best results, and discussing the mindset it takes to overcome the obstacles that all future entrepreneurs will face. Investing in yourself starts with putting in the work every single day, and this podcast is here to help you do exactly that. My name is Blake Chapman. I'm the Vice President of the Ambassador Program here at Rocket Level, and I am thrilled to be your host for the GEM series. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GEM series. On today's episode, I have an amazing guest. It is Kristin, Aquino-Pham. Hi, Kristin. How are you doing today?
Hi, doing great. Thank you.
Great. For anybody that doesn't know Kristin, Kristin is currently working in the legal world, doing business and immigration law, and has started up a startup in the past, and additionally is currently working to build a fully functioning working farm on 40 acres amidst several other things. I guess that's kind of the thing that I'm really excited to talk to you about, Kristin, is you have consistently been adding on new things that you've been interested in and diving into so many different areas. I'd love to turn it over to you to kind of tell the audience a little bit about some of the things that you've got going on right now and a little bit about yourself.
Okay, that's it's a very open-ended question. So I am a lawyer by training. I should start with that. And I currently work for a large law firm representing companies in their immigration matters. And that's what I've been doing for I've been practicing law for 10 years now. And I have been in this field for 16 years. So that's my day job, as you say. But as Blake mentioned, I'm also starting up a farm. And the way that came to be is that, during the pandemic, some folks decided they wanted to get a pet. And I decided I wanted to pursue my retirement dream a little bit early and buy some farmland. So I started out with just a little under 2 acres and used that as like my incubator to figure out what aspect of farming I liked the best, whether it was animal husbandry or producing fruits and vegetables. And I learned a lot in a very short period of time, which I'm sure you can imagine, going from being a lawyer to being a farmer, two very different types of jobs. But I did keep my law job in the meantime, but I treated the farm as a sort of hobby, I guess, at first. And I decided that I really enjoy animal husbandry. So what I learned quickly is that the way to make money off of farming is to have, and especially off of livestock, is to have sufficient land so that you can sustain the livestock without having to buy too much supplemental grain or supplemental hay. And so I took the next step of buying 38 more acres of land. And
Wow.
we'll be working on building. We'll be
2
working
to 38.
on building up. 2 to 38. It's a big change, but what I've learned is that cows and sheep, they need a lot of space. Otherwise, you're going to be buying them food all the time. And so I, bought the other acreage and am working toward building, that side, building the farm into a real business that will produce meat.
That is so cool, Kristin. My wife, I just got married 3 weeks ago, so I'm getting used to saying it.
Congrats!
She's a farmer. Thank you very much. She's a farmer. Not on, that's a dream of hers. So I was like, oh my gosh, I have such a rare opportunity to ask Kristin all these different questions, since you dove in head first about what it's like starting your own farm. But I think that's so exciting, and it sounds like something you've thought about for a long time, and maybe been marinating on this idea. You mentioned retirement plan too.
Yeah, I always wanted to have a farm to visit and to go work on after I retired. I mean, my idea was have a farmhouse that was sort of like run by other people that I could go and
Hmm.
pop in on
Yeah.
weekends, and then maybe like a house, like a little place in the city that I could go to when I felt like being there. I mean, that was always the, sort of my dream. And even when I was little, I liked to play farmer, and I would like pretend that I was, milking cows and things like that. I always thought it was so interesting. I think I really just like the self sufficiency aspect of it. I like to be able to produce my own food, my own, dairy and even flowers. If I can produce a flower and like make a beautiful flower bouquet out of it, that's always been really intriguing to me. And so I think the farming, that kind of goes along with that retirement dream for me, is that idea of being able to have a farm that produces things that people need, right? Like
Yeah,
the food, people need food. Um,
absolutely.
so yeah, well, I'm happy to talk. I could talk about farming
That's
all day.
absolutely incredible. No, I think that's so cool. And you mentioned even growing up, you still had this passion too. What was growing up like for you? Did anything, what inspired you to get to the point where, because a lot of people talk about taking on a passion project and fulfilling a dream, but I guess what blows my mind is that you executed and you knocked it out relatively quickly once you got started. So yeah, what was it like growing up? Did you have any influences that kind of helped with that mindset at all?
Mm, I would say with farming in particular, not really. I mean, I grew up in Stone Mountain, Georgia, like
Hmm.
suburbs of Atlanta, and I have no farmers, or I had no farmers in my family at the time, at least that I knew. I mean, my mom likes to garden, um, but the self sufficiency, has just always, I guess, been part of how I grew up. I mean, my parents were immigrants, and I was born kind of like accidentally, I guess I should say. So my brothers were already out of the house when I was born, so I very much was kind of like left to my own devices a lot.
Oh wow, so there's a big, probably a big age gap there. Yeah.
Huge. Yeah, my brothers are 17 and 12 years older than I am. And so when I was a child, I was doing a lot of things on my own, and my parents, I think at that point, and I'm a parent to three kids now, so I know how it feels. It's like by the time you get to that last one, you're kind of like, okay, just figure it out. And so that was definitely my life, was
Hmm.
just figure it out. And so I think that's where that drive towards self-sufficiency comes from.
Yeah.
Um, and then, so, when it comes to the execution, like actually having an idea, but then going for it. Um, you know, I would say partially my parents instilled that in me, but also it's just sort of, I guess part of being left to your own devices as a kid is you're also like, you're not really asking anyone for anything. And so if you want something to happen, you have to make it happen yourself.
Hmm.
And so there was a lot of that for me growing up. Um, and so I think the farm is definitely just another example. Of course, I should say that I also wanted to be a lawyer when I was little. So that
I
was
was
something that I
gonna ask
actually
that too.
said. And so I've done that. And, it's not, I'm fortunate in that that has provided the means to be able to execute on the farm dream, and
Yeah.
it's definitely not an easy path or one that like, everyone necessarily even wants to do.
Hmm.
Um, but that for me has been a big help, is having that other career.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like it's just such it's something that I get really excited about because I know there's so many different dreams that I've had, but it gets me really excited to think about you holding on to these childhood dreams and executing on them and getting to the point where now you're a full-time farmer and a full-time lawyer. I mean, it's pretty neat. I'm curious about the legal side too. What was the thing that attracted you to that as a kid, you think?
I maybe a desire to make my parents proud. I mean, I think that's very inherent in my culture.
Hmm.
Getting the approval of your parents and doing something that your parents can brag to their friends about.
Hmm.
I mean, and that's a very honest answer to that. So that might have been
Yeah,
part of it.
yeah.
But what I found as I've been practicing law this long is that I do like solving problems. I'm definitely a problem solver. I have pretty high frustration intolerance. So I like to, if there's a problem, I want to try to figure it out and nip it in the bud. And that is what lawyers do, on a day-to-day basis, is we're solving other people's problems or other, businesses' problems. And so that's, I think why it appealed to me, um, and has kind of gone well with my skill set. And it's interesting because farming is also a lot of problem solving. And I've seen how they
Every
relate
single day, probably. Yep.
every day. And it's different kinds of problems. And honestly, they're just much more tangible problems, sometimes than the ones that I solve as in the field of corporate law. But but it's the same sort of skill set, of being able to identify what a root cause of the problem is. For farming, it's like, is the fencing just not adequate for this type of animal? Whereas in law, it's like, well, did we, not fill out the documents in a certain type of way that could have, prevented this problem? Um, so, yeah, it's interesting. You don't
That
think
is
of the
really
two as
interesting.
being relevant to one another, but they share some skills, farming
Yeah.
and lawyering.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to somebody who came from a marketing background and then wanted to be a nutritionist and wellness type. She was saying something similar, which is that the skill set that you develop, even though it may not be as direct to where it's quite literally telling you how to, I don't know, tend to cattle or or the something like that. There are a lot of parallels that you can pull from other places, and I'd be curious. How about the other way around? Is there anything from farming that you bring back to being a lawyer now?
Yes, I definitely am much more practical. I think farming, it's practical, no nonsense. You just don't have time to dawdle on, certain decisions, because in farming, you're thinking about the animals living or dying, right? Or you're thinking about
Yeah,
animals getting out and being at risk, or even with your plants, you're thinking about, um, whether your plants are actually going to make it through the season. And so, in a way, I think that is has been a good thing, is that I've become a lot more practical. However, I will sort of caveat that with, one thing I've learned being in the corporate world for so many years is that it's not always practical. The things that
sure.
corporations are doing aren't always the
Yeah,
most practical. And so I have I've had to try to, and I'm still working on trying to temper that. Like, I have to remember that, sometimes the decisions in corporate settings are going to take longer, even, but thankfully there's no, lamb or sheep dying on the other side of the decisions,
sure,
so
sure.
they can take a little longer. But I've definitely been working on trying to balance that. So I do think, though, um, I work with a tech company as my main client, and I will say that because in technology everything is so fast paced, that that sort of practical approach is actually helpful. So that farmer approach is helpful because things move so quickly with tech
hmm
companies, and they don't want to dawdle on decisions. And I think there's more of a trend toward that, but it's more of a matter of getting, like, the internal law firm, or to sort of understand that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I also think it's kind of interesting because, yeah, I think of almost whenever you function, the way a farm functions is it heavily relies on the way that nature functions, and nature cuts out anything that's excess to an extent, right?
Hmm.
So I'd be curious, maybe if that mindset ever trickles into whenever you're advising a client or anything like that. I always, yeah, I love thinking about how those connections happen too.
Yeah, it does. It definitely trickles in, and I think, some clients appreciate it. It's sometimes when you're in lawyering, it's, you have to sort of master the art of, what the best advice is, maybe, or
hmm
what the advice is under the law, but the client cares about what's best for their business. And then the true art of practicing law is being able to communicate to them, what is best from a legal standpoint without disregarding what is best for their business. And
Yeah.
then, sort of like, so if you need to tell them that, like, like you said, the laws of nature will kind of cut out the excess. Similarly, in some ways, the law itself will sort of tell you what you can and can't do, or sometimes we'll just
Yeah.
jump in and say, nope, this is not going to work out, and it may not make any sense to you, but it's just not going to work out. But it's that art of being able to tell your clients, okay, this isn't going to work out, but we're going to look at these different options for you. And so, that is, it's it's up to the client, I think, to decide if they like that style,
Yeah.
but
Sure.
it's a free
That makes
market. If
sense.
they don't like that style of advising, they can always go to another lawyer.
That's exactly right. Yep. That's
So
exactly right.
yeah, that is it's definitely been really interesting over the past 18 months to see how I've evolved as a lawyer and as a farmer as a result of trying to juggle both at the same time.
How do you do that, by the way? Because you're a full-time mom, you're a full-time lawyer, you're a full-time farmer. Plus, I have a hunch that you're doing any number of other things. So how do you do that?
Well, so I have a farm manager who's amazing, who manages
That's
the
great.
farm, because my farm is not in Atlanta; it's in LJ, so
Hmm.
about an hour and a half outside of Atlanta. And having a farm manager is really, I mean, that's the only way I could do it unless I lived there. I don't live on the farm, and so, but it does. I mean, it costs money. I mean, being
Hmm.
very practical. I mean, it is probably half of my what I can have as disposable income is going into that, into
Hmm.
paying
Yeah.
for the farm manager. But it's been a great experience for me to have that person. Well, I've had a few of them actually, but the one I have now who is full time, he knows much more than I do about farming. And so, in a lot of ways, he is my boss, and he's telling me this is what we
Hmm.
need to do with the pigs that keep getting out. And so, and I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
You
And it
probably never
takes,
thought you'd be saying that sentence a few
I
years
know,
ago.
no, I've said so many sentences in the last 18 months I never thought I would say. um, but he's been, without him I couldn't do this. And then in his
Mm.
family helps because they're all in LJ, and they all really run that farm for me. And it's been wonderful. I mean, it definitely takes a level of humility
Hmm.
um,
Sure.
to go into something and be, I feel like I've done fine in my career as a lawyer, but then to be able to go in and say, I know nothing about this. And, maybe I am paying this person, but that doesn't mean that this person, that I'm not the one who's actually deferring to this person. Um, and it's been really good to have that. I think that, a lot of times too, in the legal career, we start to get kind of like, oh, we know what we're doing, everyone should listen to us. We have our degree and our license and all these things. And we forget that there's still a lot that we don't know,
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I encounter a lot of people in the legal profession who get stuck in that. And I hate to see that because then they will, disregard other types of people or other types of careers, and they might pass up some really good opportunities because of that. And
Yeah.
it's definitely been, very humbling for me to be taught by someone else about something I know nothing about. Like I'm a child. I often feel like a child when I talk to my farm manager. um, but that's how I balance the farm. And then work, of course, is work. And I think that it'd be difficult to balance if I were a newer lawyer. I don't think I'd have been able to do the farm thing if I were still a young lawyer. But I'm not so young anymore, so I'm able to sort of, I kind of know how to work efficiently,
Hmm.
and kind of focus on the things that really matter at work. And then with family, of course, family comes first, and the farm is an opportunity for all of us to work together. So my kids run the egg
Wow.
selling business part of my farm. They do
That's
farm
so
tours.
cool.
My husband builds. He's really good with woodwork, so he builds a lot of the stuff on the farm. And so it really is a family endeavor.
Wow. That's really amazing. Finding something, a passion that brings a whole family together to get to work on it. And are you going out to the farmers markets and things like that yet?
Not yet, not yet. So we're getting our license to sell eggs on June 23rd. So you actually have to take a class and pass this little egg handling test. So then we'll be able to go out to farmers markets. I don't know if we'll do that because that's not really going to be the focus. We want to sell meat. So the focus, the process for getting there is a little bit more intense. And so we've got to, keep working on building that. And that's another thing I was going to say is, patience. This process has taught me a lot of patience. I mean, I know, someone, get an idea in your head and you want it to happen immediately. And, you want to execute it and you want to see immediate results. And that's just not, in farming, that's definitely not going to happen.
No.
And in law, it's not, that definitely didn't happen, right? You want to become a lawyer, you have to take the LSAT, and then you have to apply to law school, then you have to get into law school, and you have to take a bar exam. It's all, a process. And I think having patience with the process has been a really good lesson for me.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. A lot of times with patience too, I see people do different ways to find that patience. Some people are able to, maybe stare into the void and just be like, I just got to go. I just got to keep moving forward. Some people do little micro goals. Do you have any advice on how you navigate, getting to that next step? Or have you ever had do you have certain ways that you do goal setting and things like that?
That's a really good question. I do both I've definitely stared into the void.
Maybe that's kind of a silly way to put it, but I guess you get what I mean by that.
I
Right?
totally get what you mean. I've definitely had my days where I've just, in fact, the most recent experience I can think of with that was that I had a farm manager, my very first farm manager was wonderful. She had some family things that brought her back to Atlanta, so she couldn't work on the farm anymore. And I definitely had a moment of just staring, into the void and wondering how, at that point I had maybe 12 animals. And I was like, who's going to take care of these 12 animals? But I do like to write down goals. I do believe in the power of writing things down. Only also because okay. I was gonna say my memory is also pretty terrible. It's gotten worse, I feel, exponentially over the years, but I like to write things down. I do believe in micro goals. So, and it can be tough. I think the hardest thing for me with the micro goals, and it kind of goes back to what I said about wanting your parents' approval. My mother is still alive, and she's excited about the farm, and she's like, well, when are you going to start, doing this and this? And it's like these big grand dreams. And she's, and it's like, well, today I just want to focus on getting through this one thing, on these two things. And so it can be tough, because sometimes you've got all this outside noise that can only see, just a little bit of the picture, but you're in the weeds trying to get to, each point. And so, so I do think though that there's that personal sense of achievement, when you do micro goals and you feel like, okay, I deposited a little bit of validation into my bank. And so I can move on to the next day. And so I do agree with doing that.
Absolutely. Have you ever wanted to give up in the process ever?
Oh my goodness.
While you're doing
it? I have today, yesterday. It just asked me which particular process. Today was definitely I don't know if I should be a lawyer kind of day, but
yes.
we have them. I have definitely wanted to give up. And in fact, I have failed, to be very honest. I tried to start 2 businesses prior to the farm, tech startup, which I did co-found it with someone, but I had to step out of that, and it still hasn't taken off, and my former partner actually did a pivot, so now the original ideas that I had are not really even there anymore, and that doesn't feel terrific, but at the same time, I know that I learned a lot in that process, and now I learned what not to do. And then prior to that, same thing. I tried to start something on my own. It didn't work out. Luckily, I had law to fall back on, in both situations. But,
Sure.
it's really tough to keep going after that. I think that's why the micro goals are important, because then, like I said, sometimes you just need a win, And so
Absolutely.
if we keep getting L's, then we just start getting bogged down, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think it's all perspective too, because a lot of people, if we were just more willing to own our places where we're like, hey, this didn't work out the way that I had envisioned it, but I learned so much. I think that would give everybody a lot of confidence to be able to, not beat themselves up so much. Yeah. So
Agreed.
yeah.
It is, it's tough. I spoke to some elementary schoolers a couple weeks ago about, well, they'd asked me to come in to talk. It was for career day, and I was like, well, which career? So, but we ended up talking about just entrepreneurship in general, and a little bit about law. And it was interesting because like half the classes, half the students were interested in law, and half the students were interested in asking questions about farms.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And then they would say very astute things. They'd say, well, don't you make more money as a lawyer than as a farmer? And these are like third
Hmm.
graders. But one of the things that I did make sure to say was about, failure, because I think it becomes such a taboo word, and then people get so afraid of it, then they don't end up taking, risks, even small ones, because they're so afraid of failure. And, I think you're right. If we can just like look at a failure as an opportunity to learn things and to do better the next time, then it wouldn't, people might be more willing to step out and try
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Because I think that's so great that you spoke to them about that, by the way. That's really, really, that's very cool. And, for me, I just feel like I just realized a while ago, I was lucky talking to a mentor and helping me realize that if you don't fail, then you're probably not pushing your threshold either, you know?
Very
And
true.
yeah, yeah, to do something, especially like what you're doing, and diving into so many different arenas. Um, what were some of the kind of takeaways that you got whenever you tried to start your own thing and went into the next, because I'm sure it informed so many other things, and everything's sort of this bunny trail effect where you bounce around and it gives you all these new ideas. Yeah, what were some of your takeaways, you think?
Um, I think the number one for the two endeavors that, didn't turn out the way I planned. And those, I actually did quit my day job in order to pursue them. And so I think that like I said earlier, patience kind of, it sort of reminded me that I have to be patient. Um, it's tough though, because, even with the farm, there's so much that I want to do. And that I know that
Sure.
if I didn't have another full time job, I'd probably be able to move forward with. But then, I just have to, I think I've learned, and this is, I'm not saying this is true of everyone. It's more true for me because I also have financial obligations to my family. I have three kids,
Yeah.
and my husband is an entrepreneur. And so, I, what I learned though is that I need to, sort of first and foremost, um, think about the financial stability of my family.
Yeah.
And so that exercising patience and knowing when to make the jump from corporate to owning my own business is something that I've learned from those two experiences. And then the second is listening, I think, more to your team. So the businesses I tried to start, I went into and I was like, I'm full of ideas and I just want to share them with the world. And
Sure.
I
Yeah.
think if I'd had more, and it's not bad to be full of ideas, but I think in hindsight, if I had just maybe taken a little more time to say, well, what do you think? You know,
Hmm.
then I could have gleaned some different ideas. And so I think the farming thing has been really good because I go in knowing nothing. So
Yeah.
it's almost like I'm just a baby and I'm going in
Yeah.
knowing nothing. All I know is that I have a little bit of, capital, and I've got ideas, but I don't know anything or whether my ideas will work. And so there's something very, very like liberating about that, to go in as a blank slate and to be willing to just accept new knowledge.
Yeah, it's because it's so vulnerable, and it's such a place where I feel like you'd have the opportunity to consider perspectives you never would have encountered in your entire life otherwise.
1000%. I mean, it's really, I mean, even just from a, like, I grew up in Metro Atlanta. I've got, I did the whole, school, college thing in Metro Atlanta in the city. And farming has brought me to areas of Georgia that I would never have gone to. It's put me in, great conversations with people that I might never have met. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And so I feel like that hasn't just made me, just a better business owner. It's made me a better lawyer as well, I think, in the sense that empathy, I think, is one thing that now, a lot of law schools are trying to figure out how to instill that in future lawyers. And I think that is something that this whole farming experience has sort of, honed inside of me, is that ability to see the commonalities in other people and to empathize, to just get along with them. So yeah, it's been a really nice experience to have that. So I'm happy for the failures, hoping this third time is a charm and it doesn't fail.
I think it sounds like it's going to be great, from 2 acres to now you're at 40 acres. Next time it'll be another 100 acres. I'm excited to see. We'll see. What's the craziest thing that you've encountered on the farm so far? Is anything super bizarre that you've dealt with out there?
Oh my gosh. I just there's so many. Let's see. Well, the most recent thing is, so I've decided that one of the types of meat that I'd like to focus on is pork. I'm going to give my farm a little bit of a plug. We're not ready to start selling meat yet, but I'm very committed to raising pigs on pasture, and not locking them up in some kind of some kind of housing, some kind of shelter, and then putting the sows in a farrowing cage where they live and can't even turn around. I mean, that's what commercial farming is like, right?
So
and your
depressing.
life, I'm sure,
Yeah.
very depressing. I mean, for me, it doesn't fit my values. So, I'm very committed to raising pigs on pasture, and I've learned so much about pigs in the last 18 months, and finally have my breeding, the breeds that I want, and sort of like my breeding pairs. And I got this beautiful 500-pound boar, and he's wonderful. He's a full-bred Hampshire boar, which is like good for making bacon. He would be our herd sire, so he'd be like the head of that breed, and we'd never process him. But definitely have underestimated how smart pigs are. And we had him in this pen, and he was able to. It was all locked up. It was hog panels, which are like stronger. They're made to keep hogs in. Well, he went under the gate, lifted it up, and removed himself from the pen, let out the sow, who and he has one child pig that's his child. They all got out, and then proceeded to let out the goats and the cows.
Oh, are you serious?
Yes. And 2 bunnies. So I wasn't there, but I wasn't there, but I'm getting calls in my office, and people are, my farm manager's like, the pig got out, he's a 500-pound boar. He's about 2.5 feet tall. Huge.
Oh my gosh.
And he got massive. Out, and then the sow was standing in the middle of the street. And so anyway, in the middle of my day in my office, I'm kind of also fielding calls about that. And so that was, those are things that I never really imagined I would deal with. But then it was kind of like, it's not really that different when we have problems, in law. I feel like we have very similar, not related to animals, but just things that just feel like you can't believe that this is happening. And
you're like, I have so little control over this right now. There's like so much going on. That's that's pretty incredible. I never would think that a pig, and he was like going full animal liberation mode on you, you know.
Full. I don't even know how to let the cows out. I mean, it was just crazy. But you know,
that's
they're really intelligent animals, very emotional. And that's why, you know, some people will say to me, how do you feel? How can you, you know, butcher your own animals that you've gotten to
hmm
know? And I said, actually, I feel like I'm doing a good service toward them because I treat them well in life. I respect them.
yeah,
I want to make sure they have the best life possible. And I recognize that in the circle of life, you know, this is just how, at least if you eat meat, you know, this is how it is. But at least I have control over how it's done and how they're raised. And
yeah.
so, you know, that's really important to me. So I have a lot of respect for pigs. They are pretty they are very crafty animals.
Yeah, they really are. No, that's really cool, and it sounds like you're doing it in a way that's so sustainable, and um, you know, giving them a shot at you know, having a you want the animals to have a happy life, and you know, that's something my my wife is always researching and looking into some of the farms that have some of the best practices out there, and it's really neat to see what people are doing in terms of like, I don't know, just taking this whole more natural way of living for animals and recognizing the real circle of life, how that would work, you know.
Yeah. Oh
Have you
yeah,
heard of
that's
white
right.
oak? Oh, sorry, go
White
ahead.
Oak Pastures in
Yeah.
Boston.
hmm
They're amazing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would that is definitely their goals for me. White Oak
Yeah.
Pasture. I mean that I think they have like 176 or 200 something acres. So
hmm
but they are totally about sustainable farming, regenerative,
hmm
putting pigs on pasture, like giving, you know, being all natural, not pumping animals full of chemicals to make them grow, you know, unnaturally fast, things like that. And I appreciate that a lot.
Pretty cool. Yeah. So you're talking about fielding calls in the office too. Are your colleagues pretty supportive of you, and or do you share that part of it, or do you kind of keep it church and state kind of situation, or?
I share it with them. I think I guess and I don't know if this is a, you know, I say this now and maybe after I finish this I'll get off and HR will call me and say something, but I tend to not hide who I am at work in the
Yeah.
corporate setting. Um, I spent, you know, the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years of my career as a lawyer trying to mold myself to be what a law firm wanted me to be, trying to be, you know, um, just, you know, not cause trouble, trying to overachieve. And I found that that doesn't always lead to anything
Yeah.
good. And so now I've, you know, decided that, you know, farming is part of me. And I've told my boss that, you know, someday I will be a full-time farmer. Um, and I've, you know, tried to put pieces into place to move toward that. I know it won't happen now, and but you know, they understand that as long as I'm doing everything I can to get the work done. That you know, that I'm going to have this farm, and I'm
Yeah.
going to keep on working toward it. So my colleagues are really
That's
supportive. As long as I'm not putting more work on them to do it, I think that they're fine with it. You know, some of them think it's interesting, or they ask a lot of questions, or they just think I'm weird, which is fine.
yeah,
So,
I can deal with that too.
I mean, yeah, I've kind of gotten to the point where it doesn't matter, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like we spend a lot of time um, trying to turn ourselves into something else, you know, for the benefit of some organization or some corporation, and
Yeah.
I don't know why. So I hope that, you know, as we build a farm and I'm able to build my own business, I like to incorporate into my business that, you know, you should be yourself. You should bring your best self to work and be your best self, or be your authentic self at work, you know, and then really like have that, not just say it, but really have
hmm
that in the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you really have consistently bet on yourself, you know, with that. Like, what's your, I guess, mindset, or because I guess what I'm thinking about, right, is people that never get out of that realization, or they never find that realization that, hey, I can try to mold myself all I want, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really lead to anything better for me necessarily. And probably the best, this is going to be like a after school special here, but the best version of yourself you can bring is your exact self, who you are, So yeah, what do you think has always propelled or led you to kind of bet on yourself, you think?
Hmm. I think having a supportive like village of people around, I've become, and not just like people who always say yes. Like I don't want
Mm-hmm.
yes people. I mean people who really care about my my growth as a person, and who give me constructive feedback and who like really take time to give me like thoughtful um, guidance. I think that has helped a lot. Um, because and then I think I've also, as you get older, hopefully, you start to identify who's not going to do that for you, and you kind of start to cut that out.
Yeah.
And so that has sort of given me the confidence to bet on myself. And I also think that having I'm very like involved obviously with my family and then with my community, and sort of having that sense that like you're part of a community and that community relies on you to be a productive part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with my family, right? My family relies on me to be a productive part of my family. And having that accountability, I
Yeah.
think it kind of forces you you become accountable to others, but you also become accountable to you. And so I recognize that, like, I'm trying to think of it. Like, so for example, with the farm, a lot of my disposable income is going into this. And I
Yeah.
have to continue, putting into it, even if it's not easy, which it isn't, continue putting into it and trying to build it, because now I've recognized that whatever I've taken, financially from my family really is going back into this farm. And so I'm betting on myself, which means, and I'm betting on this farm, and I'm maybe sacrificing a little bit of what could be given to my children. And when you look at it that way, then you think, I have to go forward with this.
Yeah.
And then I also have to know when not to go forward. But that, I think that sense of accountability helps a lot for me. Um,
No, I think that makes so much sense. A healthy sense of accountability, because it just changes the perspective and allows you to look at it from a viewpoint where you're going to be like, the stakes are big, and let's, and there's no reason for me to there's no reason for me not to thrive when I look at exactly what I have got going on right now. I don't know. It gets me. I always get so excited thinking about holding yourself to a higher standard like that, because I think that it
yeah,
just, it's something that can bring about a lot of really amazing change. You also talked a lot about community, and that's something that obviously I think is so special. So it sounds like you have a pretty good group of peers around you that you can rely on and talk to.
I do. I do. I think one of my favorite things to say is that I had a choice whether I wanted to come back to Atlanta to practice law or go elsewhere. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, no.
And so I came back to Atlanta, and I'm so glad that I did, because I have a community here. Um, and the legal community, especially the Asian legal community, has been really wonderful and close knit. And some of my best friends are in that. And then some of the places that I've worked, I'm still in contact with paralegals that have worked for me. I still are now lawyers who are far exceeding anything that I've ever done, and
Wow.
I still talk to them. And it's
That's
just
incredible.
it's really, I feel fortunate to still have those connections. And now this farming community, I've kind of started to find friends in the farming community. But then, the community as a whole, I've been involved in like community service work, and sat on boards and all these things. And, I feel like once you start putting yourself out there like that, it creates that sense of accountability, right? Because you're
Hmm.
actually now you're in it and you've committed to
Yeah.
being in it, and so now you feel like that you've like already, you sort of have to do it, not in a bad way, but in a way that says, okay, these people are betting on me and they're relying on me, and so I need to bet on myself,
Yeah.
and so it's just, and I do want to say though that there's a balance, have you seen the movie Encanto?
I no, I have not. I
No?
have not.
Okay.
No.
Well, there's a song in there. Sorry if I'm like going off on a tangent, but there's a
No,
song in there
no. This
called,
is great.
it's about one of the sisters has a power of like extra strength. Anyway, she has a song called Surface Pressure, and she talks about how she's always under so much pressure, even because she's the strongest sister.
Hmm.
And I do think that there's a balance to strike there, which is just because, it is great to hold yourself to a higher standard, great to feel accountable, but it's also good to be kind to yourself, right? And
Yeah.
understand that you can't, sometimes you're going to fall short, sometimes you're going to need help,
Hmm.
often you're going to need help. But, I think that it all kind of comes together, because what I found is that when the people who I feel accountable to, when I go to them and I say, you know what, I actually really need help right now. I'm kind of struggling right now. It's not that they then turn their backs and are like, oh, Kristin is weak. I don't want to
Yeah.
talk to her anymore. It's actually quite the opposite. They fill you,
Hmm.
they fill your cup back up when it's empty. And so, and I think a lot of, I've met people who don't realize that, getting having a village, isn't just like you have to present yourself as like always the person who's strong and who's winning and winning all the time. Like they actually do appreciate when you are, or they're there for you and they can help you when you are actually not winning. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so, I think that's really important to me. And that's why community is so important to me, because they really filled me up in times when I've been running on empty.
Absolutely.
So
No, I think that's so incredible, and also something that I rely on so much too, in the
community.
sense of, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just think about what life would be like without that. And I mean, when you just try to figure out the meaning to life or whatever, that's probably one of the biggest reasons to me to exist, is getting to, not only support others, but then, know that there's somebody that's there that, it will, at the drop of a hat, help you out if you say anything,
Yeah.
it's really pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that for you, I something that I just want to say is you do so much. I think you even just mentioned you do volunteer work as well, and you're just from this conversation, you're extremely humble about it all. I think it's pretty cool that you've done so much in your life, and gone down so many different avenues. What would you say is maybe your, I guess, favorite part of what you do right now? I know that's kind of a big question, but is there anything that stands out even in the top three things, and maybe more specifically, what's your favorite? What's your favorite reason for being in the legal world, you think?
In legal.
Yeah, that too. Hmm.
Okay. So legal, my favorite thing still is to this day, um, collaboration with really innovative and open-minded people. Um,
Hmm.
I get to do that, especially with the particular technology clients, because that's what they do, right? They innovate, and that's still one of my favorite things. Trying to find ways to address inefficiencies. But then it's just that that sort of that energy that you get in a room when they're like, okay, we have a problem, we're going to tackle it together.
Hmm.
And I do work best in situations where people are coming together like in a war room, and then they're like, okay, what's our problem? Let's like have a whiteboard session and sketch out, that's the way that I work
So
best.
you thrive
And that's
under high pressure scenarios?
definitely definitely, which is why both, I guess, farming and lawyering are good good matches for me.
Yeah.
um And then on the farming side, I mean, you need specifically asked about legal, but on the farming side, I mean, my favorite to date is when something is born, when animals are born. So we just had our first litter of piglets born on
Wow.
the farm. We had 9.
Oh my gosh.
And yes, they belong to the big pig that escaped. But his 9 healthy piglets, and we've had chicks born on the farm, puppies,
Wow.
lambs, baby goats, and that just never gets old.
No, no.
That feeling that life is being created there, and of course, then there's the anxiety of making sure that they stay alive, but
Sure.
that will never ever get old to me. And I think it almost like rejuvenates me when it happens. So so I'd say that's those are my 2 sort of favorite things with respect to the 2 careers. I guess I'm
Wow.
juggling right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. No, that's, I can't even imagine being a part of seeing so much new life born around you. I think that would be, yeah, really special. Um, and I think something that I was, whenever I hear this too, I'm going to bring it back again. What would you, yeah, I guess what would you tell to somebody who's curious about doing life sort of the way that that you do? Is there any kind of insights you could give to somebody?
Yeah, I would say that it's important to see opportunity in places where you wouldn't normally think it's there. So, um, you know, I have so many examples of this in my life, and I mean, sometimes I'm like, maybe is it luck or is it just
Mm,
perspective? Like I saw it as an opportunity, whereas someone else might have not even seen it as anything.
mhm.
But I do think that trying to look at whatever happens to you on a daily basis as a particular opportunity can be really helpful. So I guess if I can just give it like the most recent example of that would be the additional 38 acres that we are that's part of the farm. you know the reason, so I ended up getting a lot more out of that transaction than I expected,
Yeah.
and the reason that I did was just because I happened to get stuck in a truck in the pasture with the owners of the land. And I got stuck with them for about an hour and a half. And, spent that time, I didn't want to leave them because they were a little older and I didn't want to leave them alone in this
Sure.
truck in the middle of the pasture. So I waited with them till a tow truck could get there. There was no tractor nearby that could pull them out. So I ended up spending a lot of time with them and talking to them, and they had always dreamt of turning that land, which had been passed down through their family. They'd always dreamt of turning it into a farm, but their kids didn't want to, and they
Mhm.
weren't. Their grandkids didn't want to, and they couldn't do it anymore. And so it turned out working out really well for me because that's exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, you know,
Wow.
um, I know it's very, and you wouldn't think that
That's,
would happen, right? Like,
yeah.
it seems so lucky, and it's not like they just gave me the land or anything like that, like but
Sure.
it
Sure.
was just that as the in that conversation, when I was talking to them, it's just that well, it wasn't that I was in there and I was like, well, let me see if I can try to squeeze some goodwill out of these folks so that they'll sell me their land. I mean, I was already looking
No.
to buying it, but
Yeah.
it was that opportunity to spend some time with some people who I probably would not have met otherwise, right? And to try
Mhm.
to find things that we have in common and to ask them what their dreams are or what their goals are or what they're up to in their own lives. And I think all of that, it became an opportunity. And so, I think a lot of times folks might miss opportunities. And I tell this to my husband all the time because he's not quite as he doesn't wear the same rose colored glasses that I do all the time. But
Yeah.
I always say, this was an opportunity, like, maybe go for it. And you hear this a lot, but what's the worst that can happen? Someone says no, and then you move on. It's no is
Yeah.
not a
Yeah.
terrible word.
No.
So
No, absolutely. No, I like that you said the rose colored glasses, I think is what you said. And just, I think of in sociology, you can have, they call it the sociological lens, which is essentially looking through the world through the viewpoint of, recognizing that there's different structures that make up the way society functions and all that. But I think that applies to really anything, and especially with opportunity. And when you have a mindset that is able to view opportunity and be open-minded, it is kind of like wearing a set of lenses, having some sort of lens in front of you, and it opens up a lot of doors. So I love that.
It's been really helpful to me, and I think, like, even if because I recognize that we're all built differently, right? But I'll tell some of my mentees this, like, maybe, because they'll say, I don't want, I'm not good at networking. I'm shy. I don't, like to just talk to just all these people about, like, random things and small talk, which I get, not everybody
Sure.
likes that. But then it's like, okay, well, then go into it like this way. Like, think about who's going to be there. See if you can, a lot of times you can get a guest list or something. You can get a sense of who's sponsoring and who might be there. And then make it very targeted and almost approach it like like an experiment, or like a science experiment or something, where you've got a very specific question or goal, question that you need to get answered, or goal that you need to attain. And then go into it that way with and keep it sort of like micro level, so that you don't feel like you have to go in and shake every hand in the room. And that makes it a little bit more, a little bit more doable for some folks. And so, and I tell them that, and I think that helps. And so, that's kind of the way I approach things is, if I'm going to attend something, I'm not necessarily going to think, oh, if I attend this, then someone is going to buy my startup. It's not usually that. I mean, that happens to some people. That certainly never happens to me. But it's more like, if I attend this, I might meet somebody who maybe will know somebody later who might buy my startup, or something even more removed than that. So, but yeah,
absolutely.
that's been my greatest lesson so far. I think is opportunity is everywhere.
Yeah, that is a great lesson. It also just makes life a little more exciting, I think, right?
Doesn't it? Doesn't it? I agree. I think if you go into each day, because they start to all run together, I feel like eventually, but if you go into each one thinking there's an opportunity for something to happen today, then, it can make it a little bit easier to get out of bed when the alarm goes off.
Absolutely. Well, Kristin, it has been an absolute pleasure getting to talk to you. I really appreciate you sharing so much of this with everybody and with me. It's great.
No problem at all. And I hope that you and your wife can come visit the farm.
I would love to. I was about to invite myself, so thank you. I would love to come check it out. Is there anything that you'd like to plug or announce to anybody? And I'd love to share that with the audience too.
Not yet. I will say that, like I said, on the farming side, we'll be making meat products, but it's going to be a little bit of a process. So just keep an eye out. And when there's an announcement to make, we'll definitely make it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, hey, thanks, Kristin. It was great to chat with you.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Gem Series, the podcast for anybody dedicated to investing in themselves. If you would like to see the resources mentioned in this episode, learn more about what we are up to at Rocket Level, or come over and join our team, just click on the links below. Until next time, this is Blake Chapman, and remember to be awesome and do awesome things.